In this video, I'm going to talk about 3 things you may not know about HVAC forced air zoning.
If you run a home service business like painting, contracting, lawn care, or cleaning, your to do list is endless. From hiring staff to mountains of paperwork, not to mention doing the actual work that pays the bills. Jobber is a mobile and online app that helps you organize your business and look professional. With Jobber, you can quote jobs, schedule your crew, invoice, and get paid all in one place. Try it free today at getjobber.com/shop talk.
The first thing I'm going to talk about in zoning is the fact that a lot of people think that zoning is a great way to save money. If you think about it, you could probably come to the realization that that is not true. Zoning, like I've always said, is mainly for comfort. And for those of you who may be unclear what I'm talking about, zoning is taking one particular HVAC system and splitting it into different comfort zones with the use of a control board, thermostats, and air dampers. Now, it's always kind of a delicate balance, but the machine is actually going to be coming off and on more often than it normally would. So you have those higher startup amps and watts, but it's not going to run any less than it would have before unless you do a very, very particular set of thermostat settings. And most people don't. Most people just have it for comfort, and therefore it's not really about saving any money. It's more about addressing swings in loads during the day or evening. Another misconception is it's going to be easier on your system overall. Now, a lot of us that are service techs and installers know that that's not true, because you do have a system that's going to come on and off more often. In fact, a lot of things, particularly the contactor, are worked out more heavily. So you may have premature failure in a number of parts because they're really not built to withstand the rigors of zoning. Contactors is the example I use the most because you have a unit that's starting and stopping a lot more often. In fact, if I were going to put in a new zoning system today and the system was using an old style contactor, I'd probably replace it and put in some kind of Emerson Sure switch or equivalent, so at least it would last a little bit longer. Switches like the Sure switch kind of cut down on the electrical issues you have when you're starting and stopping the system, therefore they'll last a whole lot longer. They also have some diagnostic capabilities depending on which ones you're choosing. Another characteristic of zoning that a lot of folks don't think about is the fact that they need to be highly tuned to be effective. That means when you start up a system, and let's say you have 3 or 4 zones, you need to make sure that each zone is getting the proper amount of air, and that if you're using a bypass, it's set up properly. Nowadays, bypasses can be a lot more complicated than the old arm and weight that we used back in the day. And back in the day, you take that weight on the arm of the bypass damper and you slide it back and forth depending on how much air you wanted to go through at a certain pressure. Now there's static pressure sensors, there's a lot more finely tuned zoning equipment, but you have to make sure you test it out. If you have 3 zones closed and 1 zone open, your bypass should be bypassing a lot of air. If it's not, then that small zone probably sounds like there's a 747 landing in that room. Also, I've seen many systems where the bypass isn't open at all. It just stays closed all the time, and that can be because the system had issues, because it wasn't designed properly, and the issue would be it was circulating too much air. Maybe the coil was freezing, or maybe the sensor that's supposed to protect the coil from freezing was tripping off all the time. Zone boards do have some protections, which are nice, but if you don't size up the system properly, you may end up going back over and over again to address low temperature cutouts or high temperature cutouts and heating. A final lesson about zoning is choosing your components carefully. There's a wide variety of quality in the zoning world. It starts with the very bottom when you have spring dampers. Spring dampers are dampers that are motorized, but then they spring closed or open depending on how they're set up. Now, spring dampers take a lot of force to open and close against that spring. Therefore, they wear out very quickly. They also use a lot more energy than a power open, power closed damper. And that comes into play because you have to size a transformer for a zone system. And if you don't allot the proper amount of energy, eventually that transformer is going to burn up or the fuse is going to pop. In fact, zone dampers that have springs typically use 3 or 4 times the amount of electricity as power open, power closed dampers. Now, it's still a small amount, but when we're talking about 40 VA transformers, 75 VA transformers, you have to make sure you have the right one, or you're going to end up having a headache on your hands. And those spring dampers, even though they're worse in that area, they're also worse for reliability. So you might be changing motors on spring dampers a lot more often than you do on power open, power closed dampers. So just think about this stuff, guys and gals out there. I hope it's helpful. If you're zoning, I think the number one thing is it's not going to be saving you a ton of money. It can, I guess, in certain instances, but most of the time you might even use a little bit more money to cover zoning. Don't tell your customer they're going to save money, or they're going to be mad at you and they're going to blame you for all their problems, and you don't want that. You got your own problems, right? So deal with those instead. Okay, God bless every one of you, and I'll see you guys on the next video.
Save 8% off your order at TruTechTools.com by using the Shop Talk discount code.